pulse checks, we see a lot of comments about mental health. So we want to share one example of a comment we've seen about mental health. Here's a comment that a parent shared. I realize teachers and administrators are facing some serious challenges. As such, please start thinking outside the old traditional boxes. With the whirling noise in your students' ears every day, I think outside professional counselors should be brought in periodically for a well check for the students. This is just one comment that represents what we've seen hundreds of thousands of times from parents. And you saw the news clip in the previous slide that represents what's happening not only in Tennessee, but across the country as states grapple with the mental health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to watch about a 3-minute clip. During the pandemic last year, Melina, who is on the panel, she hosted about an hour-long session called Life as a Quarantine, where she sat down with students and asked them questions about what their life was like. And we want to share this as a tee-up just to bring the voices of students in at the beginning as we consider kind of who we're thinking about. And even as we care for ourselves, we're also thinking about how we care for them. So we're going to just take about 3 minutes to watch this clip, and then we'll get right into the panel.
What has been the hardest part about all of this for you all? Someone who hasn't spoken, well, a few people who haven't spoken yet. What has been the hardest part about COVID quarantining for you?
Honestly,
You go.
no, you can go first.
I think the hardest part for me has been like it has been like getting used to being alone. Because I think like when beforehand, like there was a lot of like distractions, like it's always people around you, you have school and you have parties, it's like always something going on. But now like I really like have to like sit alone, by myself like for most of the day. And it's kind of hard to adjust to because I'm not used to being alone all the time, or not nearly as much as I am now. So I think that's been the hardest part for me.
Okay, I was gonna say, like, honestly, just getting out of bed, like when you see like so many people like struggling and hurting around you, it's like, what's kind of the point? Like, a lot of us have been thinking, like, what's the point? And so I don't know. It's like sometimes I don't even have like the energy to like get out of bed and use the restroom, brush my teeth, shower.
The hardest part for me about this is that, you know, the kids that have siblings or whatever, we have to take care of them and help them. And then, our parents sometimes still leave us chores to do, and we have to do that too. So it's really hard to try and balance everything out and doing school.
Cordell first. We haven't heard Cordell yet.
The hardest thing for me is just that I can't be myself 100% because I'm the most energetic person. I'd probably be running down the hallways, laughing with the teachers, laughing with everybody. And it's hard for me to do that in a Zoom call in my bed. Sometimes the lights be off. And I try to bring it into the class. I probably be joking with Ms. Martinez or joking with Mr. Greenfield, just a couple teachers. But it's like you don't got the same bond as a teacher you have in person. And that was hard for me to have.
Yeah, so thanks for sharing that, Melina. And that is on YouTube, so you can watch the whole session if you want to. But it's really powerful. But given that you both work with students and families and are a parent yourself, and I'll start with Melina and then go to Susanna, like, how are you holding up?
So the fact that I'm on my computer, my daughter's computer, is a little telling, but I will say, as the old folks say in church, I'm yet holding on.
Yeah. How about you, Susanna?
Yeah, I feel like it's sort of mama mode. Is like, well, you just do what you got to do. It's tough, but you just got to do what you got to do for the babies. And so, but realistically, being in the world of sustainability and resilience, I know that it can't be indefinite, right? Like, it is not realistic to think that I can just keep doing whatever I need to do for as long as I need to do it. And so that steady, periodic self-care and those check-ins on a personal level have been pretty important.
Yeah. Melina, what are you doing to, like, you're a counselor, so you see students who have lots, I mean, you just heard 3 minutes of that, and like, I mean, that's enough to just, so you're a counselor, you have a graduating senior, a freshman in high school. What do you do for yourself to take care of yourself?
So you know how we have these buzzwords. Intentional right now seems to be a buzzword, but I am very intentional about my time and my self-care. And it started something that started during quarantine. I take sunset strolls, is what I call them, literally at sunset every day. I go for a walk, go for a jog, but it's like the most calming, peaceful time of the day. And that sacred time for me. I invite my kids, like, especially during the quarantine part, I would invite my kids every single time. And 1 in 10 times they would say yes. But for that one time that they say yes, I would keep asking them, and they would be like, why do you keep asking us? Why? Because one of these times you're going to say yes. I would be pleasantly surprised when they did. I literally keep calming lotion at school. Yesterday during class, I teach a leadership class. I literally passed around the lotion during circle time, and my students just know that's what we do. And they, at any point during class, they need to smell the lotion. We will do it before ACT exams, SAT. I have essential oils that I keep around my neck. I mean, just as much as I can just bring into my space for me, because it gets completely overwhelming. Like Susanna said, it's like go. We just have to ready, set, go, and we don't really have time to think often. So as much as we can have, as much as I can have in place already, that's standard self-care for me, it is essential.
I love that, having a routine so you don't have to think about it, and then having things that are easily accessible. Susanna, what about you?
I love the sunset stroll idea. I might borrow that one. That's really good. Very big fan of the essential oils. Got a little bit on my neck, got the diffuser going, got my candle going. It does kind of ground me with that strong sense of smell. I feel like it's been a bit hit or miss, honestly. Like I feel like I can manage the freneticism for a while, and then I can't. And so those are those periodic check-ins. I love ritual, but I'm not so good with routine. I don't know if that
I love the
differentiation makes
distinction.
sense. Yeah. Yeah, I can find it sort of when I need it, but it is not as regular as I'd like. Sometimes I have reclaimed early mornings for myself, because that is when it is particularly hectic with a 5th grader and a 9th grader and a mama who works from home. And reclaim some of that time for breathing, for centering, for mindful intentions for my day, reintroducing myself to some meditation, even if it's just 8 or 10 minutes in the morning, really makes a difference. Yeah.
And I love the distinction between ritual and routine, because sometimes routine can be hard to find, but ritual, you can kind of, it can be a little bit easier to find. So Melina, we heard some of what your students were sharing. What are some of the trends you've noticed in student mental health the past few years, particularly that are different from previous years?
Well, something that is helpful is that students, thankfully, one of the, we've got to look for the perks from the pandemic. One of them is that mental health is at the forefront. People are not ashamed to talk about it anymore. And our students in a heartbeat will say, I need to focus on my mental health. I need to protect my mental. They call it their mental. I need to protect my mental. But something that is even more so, because I work with predominantly Black and Latinx students, the pandemic, COVID hit us very hard. And so we had a lot of students whose parents, grandparents, guardians have died and continue to die. So dealing with a lot of grief, and dealing with issues of not living with their parent or guardian, and all of the emotions and anger and frustration and that comes with that. And so self-harm, unfortunately, is pretty common. The idea of self-harm, I often say, they will say just as quickly as they say, I'm hungry, I need to get something to eat, they'll say, I'm over it, I don't want to be here anymore. Beware. And then that opens up a whole, I don't want to be here, I'm over it, beware, at school, at home, in life, on this earth. And that is just, it's so common for them to say, I'm just over it, I don't care anymore, I don't want to be here anymore. And it's becoming more and more common now. in this environment.
And so, I mean, Susanna, you work more with elementary school students, so I'm gonna ask you a kind of similar question next. Melina, where do you like, okay, so I'm sure even within your environment, there's not enough mental health counselors for all the needs. So like, given that, what should a school do? Like, what could schools do given limited people resources to help students even start to like make steps?
So a few things. One, we have peer counselors at my school, which they are an amazing support for me, and I have a co-counselor. There are two of us for about 600 students, which some people might think that's a lot of counselors for 600 students, but we are primarily focused on the social, emotional, mental health of more or less 600 students who have experienced or are currently experiencing some form of extreme trauma. So there are not enough of us. So the peer counselors are extremely helpful. We do classroom guidance lessons. We do advisory lessons that focus on social and emotional learning, which are extremely helpful also. But our peer counselors, they're students. They have their own trauma. There's times when I'm like, we need to take a time out from the peer counselor so that we can work through their issues, because they can't be helpful to anyone else if they're going through their own issues. Training the teachers. We've done more with helping the teachers understand this is what you do if a student shares some level of not just abuse, because mandated reporting, we do that training at the beginning of the year, but helping teachers understand if a student shares with you that they have experienced some level of sexual trauma or have thoughts of harming themselves, this is what you do, this is how you support them, please, ensuring that they reach out to us. But we've also been doing a lot of just talking and educating with our parents, not as much large group, but our parents are much more open now than they have been in previous years. When we call a parent and say your child is expressing these thoughts, sometimes parents would be quick to dismiss it. Parents are listening more now than they used to and trying to support and hear and understand, because they see that the suicide rates, especially among teens, has risen. So parents are listening more when we reach out to them. We also have an organization, a community-based counseling that we have on campus that KIPP has formed a partnership with, Legacy Community Health. So our high need students, we refer them to Legacy because they can meet with them on a weekly basis, where we just can't, me and the co-counselor, we don't have the structure where we can say, okay, every Tuesday at 2:00, we're going to pull this student, because too much happens in the school day. So we refer them to Legacy. Also, students who have been hospitalized in the mental hospital, psychiatric hospital, once they return to campus, we will link them up with Legacy so they can continue to have outpatient therapy as well. So we tried the best we can, and it's still not enough.
Yeah, well, those are some very helpful tips. So don't underestimate all of those tips, because it is so big. We can, we're kind of take the steps we can. Susanna, what are you seeing at the elementary level? Yeah, and I also see people putting their ideas in the chat too, things you're doing. So please do. I love using that space for any ideas and things you all are doing as well.
It is a bit different for us because ours is a partnership with Metro Schools. So the students are joyfully, gleefully coming out to the garden to be with us. And we really, though, have doubled down on what it means to be a social emotional learning support for our partner schools, where we've had some really vulnerable and open conversations early on with the leadership teams to say, what do you need us to be? I mean, we're a flexible resource. And so how do you need us to show up? And we've had some very progressive, thoughtful partners say, let's pull back on the academics out here. Let's let them be. Let's let them be students outside in the fresh air. And of course, we're always advocating for that. And
before, what were you all prioritizing that?
Well, so we do still align with standards, and each of our lessons has a handful of related standards in it from pre-K to 4th grade. And we haven't given up on those, but we're not holding so tightly to it. I mean, we've always been an organization that follows the awe and wonder of the student, because if you see a giant praying mantis, I don't know what the lesson is, it doesn't matter. The praying mantis is pretty awesome. So, but we really have had an opportunity to just really make that the focus. It's one of the silver linings, like Melina talked about. It's just like, we've gotten different attention because it's it's not just a pretty space. You know, there is real benefit and the social emotional benefit of being in the garden. I mean, serotonin is released when microbes from the soil are breathed in. And so it has been an opportunity to highlight that and an opportunity to see the benefit in just being outside and being a child. And so that has been the way we've handled it. I mean, and still though, I mean, we see the stress and the exhaustion on the teachers. We see it on family members who are having to come pick up kiddos for a quarantine. We are feeling it as a team, but and not that we've been able to elevate above it, but regularly when we have team meetings, there is immense gratitude for being in this work where we are literally grounding ourselves and really feeling that the gift of that being it for ourselves, for our team, and for our students, being able to gift that to the students at this time.
And I know just a side conversation I've had with you, Susanna, you can provide lots of inspiration between the connection between nature and kind of our own lives. And you mentioned kind of being in work with sustainability and resilience. Can you share kind of some of the connections, and this is also for the parents in the crowds, maybe connections that they can help make to their students when they're seeing kind of life unfold through nature? What are some of the connections you make for students when you're out in the gardens? I know that's like a big question, but yeah.
Well, the rhythms are important. That's why I love the sunset stroll. I mean, the rhythms, they're harder to miss when you're outside. And we live in a very sort of controlled world with these four walls and this lighting and this temperature. And so being out there and being witness to those changes through the season is really important. This time of year, particularly, we have to remind teachers and parents that it does look a little ugly out here right now. That's okay. It's supposed to. We're saving these seed and these plants just took a frost hit. So that is pretty important. And then just that connection to these moments of, that was magical. I mean, happiness research shows us that when you're connected to moments of awe and wonder, of feeling a part of something bigger than yourself, then that does something for your long-term happiness and well-being. And so we really celebrate that and remind parents and teachers that it doesn't have to be a big, huge thing. Like, we never start with our partner gardens with a huge installation. It's always a conversation first about what this space needs to be for the young people. So for parents, it is just a stroll in the evening, just a walk through your neighborhood and notice what's going on, even if it's in an urban environment. There's still, nature will find her way. And there's a lot of really powerful things going on, even in really sidewalked urban environments.
That's great. Melina, you were talking about how parents are more receptive now. So I'm curious, what are some of the things that you want parents to know? As they're listening and trying to better help their students.
One of the main things that I hear my students complain about, and I hear parents say it out of their mouths, is what are they so stressed about? Why are they stressed out? Parents underestimate the level of stress that even elementary school kids have on them, and they dismiss it. And so if a child who is already stressed, depressed, anxious, feels dismissed by the person or people who should be hearing and understanding them the most, that can be the one thing that pushes them over the edge if they're already teetering on the edge. So for parents, really just to listen to hear and try to understand, not to listen to compare, because that's also something the students say. As soon as they try to tell their parent what's going on, then the parent starts comparing. Well, you don't know what stress is. I go to work and I have bills, and they start listing all of these things. Or when I was in school, all I had to do was focus on school. You're worried about the wrong things, and the parents are completely missing what the students are saying because they're too busy trying to compare or even fix the problems, like trying to give them advice. And they're not necessarily asking for advice. They just want their parent to listen and try to understand what they're saying and what is really stressing them.
That's helpful. Anything else?
For parent that it's serious, that even so we have students who on one hand might really be struggling with suicidal thoughts. And what is the value? What's the purpose? That's something students say often. What is the purpose of this? It looks depressing. It looks like there's no end in sight. We as adults have seen better days. A lot of our students, as they're developing, this is the crux of their life, right? They don't really know what better looks like. Even the ones, if they say, okay, I'm looking forward to going to college, the students in college are still pretty isolated, and a lot of them are still doing virtual learning. I had a student yesterday just go through like, what's the point of all of this? High school student, of course. What's the point of all of this? I'm working hard to graduate, to go to college, to get a job, to be stuck in a job and do that for the rest of my life. Ugh, I don't want to do that. I'd rather just die now. This is their mentality, is like, what do we have to look forward to? So from the parents' perspective, to help them, and it's constantly helping them find things to look forward to. Don't make adulthood look so daunting and miserable that the kids have nothing to look forward to. Don't dread work so much that they're like, why do you want me to hurry and graduate and get a job exactly? Because, you know, we can kind of make it look miserable sometimes. So we really just have to be conscious of how we are spending our own lives. And I tell them, we as adults, we've made choices for our lives. Your parents, they've made their choices. So if they're miserable, that's the choices that they have made. You do not have to follow their choices and live up to the expectations that they have for you, because they already had their chance. So we really need to help children advocate for themselves and just see that life is so much bigger than where we are right now.
That's a great point. Yeah, we do sometimes, and probably because we need to create our own space where we can actually reflect and process and start, instead of doing that on our kids. So that's a really great reminder. Okay, so if you all could go back to the summer and help districts and schools plan for the complex mental health and academic needs students will come in with, what would you tell them or advise them? So I'll start with you, Susanna. So you see what you're seeing now. Students are coming in with lots of needs, academically, social, emotionally, etc. What would you say?
It feels a little like I'm dotting my I's with hearts when I say something like this, but I really wish we would just call Uncle or Mercy. I wish we would have just said, we cannot continue as we have. Whatever that looks like, teaching to the test, doing these things at this pace. Like, I'm grateful that as an organization, I have the support of a board and a team where we were able to say, what can we control? Everything feels completely out of control. What can we control? We can control the pacing of our lessons. Let's pull it way back. They're not taking in a lot of information, so let's talk about composting for 2 or 3 weeks in a row. Just let them be in it and absorb it at a different pace. I wish we would have adjusted the pacing, and I wish we would have just said, Uncle, Mercy, we need a break. Like, let's not continue to measure by the same standards. I wish we would have had that real conversation in the summer. And just adjusted expectations accordingly. Because I think that is the hard part. I loved what you said, Milena, about just the parents needing that space to breathe too. I mean, we've not had any reprieve, especially here in the South, of just being able to just like breathe it in, reevaluate, readjust. It's just been, let's move on to the next iteration of this. So I wish we would have just taken a deep breath and said, we all need to just kind of slow our roll a little bit with this.
Yeah, and I love that idea of like resetting expectations and slowing down to just kind of like sit and be like the something, like have the content and like let us just kind of take a slower approach. And it might, who knows? I mean, we could it would work better to go kind of deep and not feel like rushed and urgent. Melina, what about you?
I absolutely agree. I think we took maybe a week at the beginning of school to slowly get, I don't even know if it was a full week, but to get into the swing of things and focus on the students' social emotional learning. I don't think it was a full week, but we absolutely needed more time, because what happened was once academics kicked in on we'll call it week 2. I'll be generous and say it was week 2. Once we got full going into academics, then we realized how much we had lost. And so then we went into overdrive. And instead of pulling back, like Susanna said, to, all right, let's get ourselves together, because while we're in overdrive, we also realize, oh, our 9th graders really are 7th graders mentally, because the things they are saying and doing, it is not at all 9th grade appropriate, which is already inappropriate enough, you know, but we just went full speed ahead into academics, and we are definitely feeling the impact of that now. Yeah, we lost some time academically, but if the whole world lost time, did we really lose time academically? I mean, we're all down a little bit, right? So the baseline has just dropped. So I don't understand, what are we racing against if we all, I don't know. It's not, we're not in a good place. And instead of still in November, stopping to realize, hold on, let's, like you said, Susanna, let's just say mercy, breathe, take this time to reset. No, we're taking this time to revamp and just, it's not working. And so it's like compounded problems, compounded academic problems on top of compounded mental, social, emotional problems, because the students still aren't learning it academically because they're struggling in so many other ways. They can't. I mean, they're just not able to process. And I teach a class, a student leadership class. So they're the top, most of them are top academically, but by far they're, the more mature, more vocal. I won't say more mature, they're more vocal about their needs and their challenges. And we were supposed to have an event today for my student leadership class, but we literally had to take a whole class period, and it was an hour and a half class just to stop. We just said, we're going to postpone our event because so many of them were struggling with different issues that they were like, I cannot even think about planning an activity for the school tomorrow. I can't even function myself right now. And I think we just need to do that more often. I have the flexibility to do that because it's a leadership class. Math and science, so social studies may not have that luxury, but why not? Why can't we give our academics, the core class, the same luxury, just because our students are not retaining the information if they're not in the mental space for it?
There's this idea of parallel processing where, like, kind of what you process, you push downwards, kind of parallel. And so it's hard when, and sometimes we see this in family feedback, where a good example is last year when schools reopened in Tennessee, there was still testing that was going to happen. And a lot of parents were asking, like, why are we doing this testing? Like, especially for kids in high stakes grades, like third grade, they haven't been in school all year. They're coming back in person. The first time they're coming back, they're taking a test. But that was coming from the state that then kind of processed into the districts and then processed that stress onto schools, then parents and students. And so I do think it's, to your point, Susanna, sometimes the people on top of us aren't saying, Uncle, stop, time out. And so we have to sometimes just figure out a way to kind of push against that parallel processing and say, stop and time out.
Well, and my kiddos were virtual the entire time when that was an option. So that was the only time they stepped foot in the school building, was to go take a test. It was so awkward. I'm like, what are you expecting to measure here? Because they haven't seen their peers for 18 months. So, no, it was, yeah. Not great.
Yeah. So I'm going to start taking a couple of questions from the chat. So how do you address concerns of a sad child whose parents have told her not to tell anyone what's going on in their home?
I still encourage children to speak up. And that was something that is one of the many benefits of schools, is children at some point will speak up, whether it is immediately. By the time they get to high school, often students are tired of keeping it to themselves, and they see that it didn't work out at all. So they start speaking up definitely by high school, but I still encourage them to speak up and say, this is your life. Advocating for yourself is really important. So I understand that homes are private and safe spaces, but this is a safe space too. And we want you to be healthy, and we want you to be okay. So please share if something is bothering you, especially if you're, and encourage them that their feelings are real and they are absolutely valued, and just listen to them as much as possible.
I'd like to see supports for those parents who are saying, don't say anything, because clearly there needs to be some help there.
Yeah, and that's something we recommend often, like what sometimes parents will just share kind of vaguely, but we just say a general family check-in where maybe you can just call the family and say, hey, just wanted to check in, see how things are going. And sometimes they'll open up, sometimes they won't. Yeah. Aaron put in the chat, the educators are people too who need to take a breath, who need a breath. Susanna, you talked about kind of some of the stress you see for teachers, and we certainly see and hear this. And I'll share a tip for any administrators in terms of something we saw that's been powerful with one of our partners. But curious, what are some ways that you think or would encourage teachers to take care of themselves?
Well, our teachers, the big people, are often our toughest learners in the garden. They've convinced themselves that they can't grow anything. And so the beauty of this partnership is they're out there with us. And so they are learning alongside the young people. And it is an opportunity to document and to assist,
Mm.
and certainly to help with behavioral management, but it's also an opportunity for them to just be in the garden. And so we encourage them, particularly when things are all flush in late summer, early fall, to be like, come on out and get whatever you need. Take some herbs, take them back to your classroom, make some tea after we do the herbal tea lesson. So to interact in the garden in a space that is a bit more empowering for them as well, because we're a culture largely of a couple of generations of folks who don't have that sort of connection with the land and growing their own food. So yeah, and they get to be learners too. So we have moments of kiddos reassuring the teachers of like, it's okay, that bee won't hurt you. You know, he's just pollinating those blueberries. So yeah, it's just super sweet moments of just reminding folks that this is a resource for you too, and that it's okay for you to just come out here and take a breath during your lunch break as well.
And it is a reminder, like we, I mean, I don't know, I'm like a couple generations, but to your point, like, I mean, I've learned lots of new things about the moon and the planets and the stars lately. I've learned lots of new things about the earth. And so we as adults are not necessarily fully connected to the opportunities that the earth, and, you know, like, I think, oh, if you've been to a beach, you kind of see it in real life. You're like, that's sometimes where you're outdoors, you see like the bigness of the ocean and wonder. But I think I've only recently, really during this past couple of years, where I've come to appreciate it in just like my neighborhood. So I think that's super powerful. Um, Another question from Natalie: how can leadership balance SEL needs with pressures from the district, or how can they incorporate it into current systems?
So I've been fortunate to be able to lead a few of our professional development. You know, we have our weekly faculty meetings, and whenever I have led a few sessions, I always get several teachers come to me afterwards and say, this is what we need to be spending more of our time doing instead of focusing so much on curriculum and instruction. So I encourage leadership and administration to notice that if you keep having to say the same things to the teachers and they're still not doing what you're asking them to do, maybe there's a reason for it. And so maybe we need to spend a little more time, not just in the classroom, but with the teachers and faculty, focusing on their mental health and their ability just to breathe and take on more and process their own feelings that may have absolutely nothing to do with school, but it's still impacting their ability to do their job. But at the same time, when we do have, we have time that we're supposed to do SEL, social emotional learning, in our classrooms throughout the week. That time has slowly gotten replaced with academics the closer that we get to testing. So from the student's perspective, it's like, is this really as important as y'all are saying? Because y'all keep taking away. So if we say it's important, we need to stick to it and hold true to it, because we say it is important for the first 4 or 5 weeks of school, then it's no longer that important. Then when we want to return to it, it's like, really? Now you want to return to it? When we might have lost the teachers, not lost the students and the teachers as well. So we really just have to be, not only say that it's important, but really show that it is throughout the school year.
I think that is so true. I also think that one of the silver linings of this pandemic is an opportunity to reimagine what social emotional learning support can look like. I love the idea of a peace corner in a classroom. The whole garden is a peace corner. And we're getting students outside then with nature doing the work of what any sort of curriculum or manipulatives or whatever a classroom might need inside a peace corner. So certainly sounds like I'm advocating for more school gardens, and I am. Or outdoor education just in general. I mean, it is such a beneficial resource, and I use that word, you know, it's very specifically here because that makes it sound a bit consumable. But the common good in our culture has kind of gotten lost. And nature, outdoor spaces, fresh water, fresh air, places just to be and to breathe deeply are not prioritized in the way they can be. And that's, you know, at this sort of very macro level. But then when you bring it down to the schoolyard, it's just a playground with metal equipment and asphalt in a lot of cases. And so there is so much opportunity to re-green school spaces where young people get to be and breathe and plant and see and just watch nature. Even in an urban environment, there are a lot of spaces we're mowing that could be done differently, managed differently, you know, and it's just an incredible resource that we've kind of forgotten about.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting. I think about how much I love just going outdoors for classes in high school. And you would think, like, given what we know about COVID transmission, that we would be doing a bit more of just taking our class outside. So it's just a reminder that we're up against kind of uh, I don't know, gravity or something, or against the force. Aaron asked, how do we get state districts and then schools to relieve the pressure? It's a great question. I'm going to share, while y'all are thinking, I'm going to share something that one of our partners did that we've seen as being really powerful. So one of our school partners, they use staff pulse checks, and they use it to ask their staff, what can we take off of your plate? Both to kind of better support students. And what was interesting were a couple of things. One is, like, there were clear themes that came about of, things around, like, additional duties, like hallway duties or cafeteria duties, like kind of those came up, as well as even some of the PD, or like the things that they were doing for culture building that actually were just kind of like burdensome at this point because we're not in that space. And so the school removed some of those things. So that was really powerful. And so just like they have very concrete and tangible ideas. So that's something that I think at a school or district level could happen. We'll just ask, what can we take off of your plate? Something I thought was interesting was the number of teachers who didn't know. They were like, I don't know what you can, like, I don't know what we can take off of our plate, which I think speaks to the level of commitment of teachers. But then also just that we also, as if you are a person who is in a role of leadership, sometimes they need help kind of seeing like what they can do. I do this meditation app, and one of the meditations this morning was, what if you're basically what if the problem that is complicated to you really had a simple solution? Like, what would that look like? Sometimes we overcomplicate problems when really the solution might be more simple. And so I think sometimes we can help other people see, like, here, what you really, this looks like a complex problem, but really you could have a conversation instead. Like, that might make it a little bit easier. So I think that's maybe a powerful lever. But I'm curious, now y'all had some big time, because I know it's a big question. So how do we get state districts and schools to relieve the pressure?
So many states, districts, and schools are data driven. It will be time consuming, but to show real data of this is what happens with our students when we don't give them time to decompress, SEL lessons, like this is what it looks like for the weeks that we spent time devoted to it. This is what our data looks like. And then the data can be behavior driven. It can be academic, exit tickets. Somehow I think they just will need to see the data. And it sounds like how you get, it is cumbersome, but I don't think they are going to listen and really make a change until we show them some proven data.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you have me thinking about some states where we could even share some high level data that, just to help. Because again, I think sometimes the people who are getting the feedback are not the policymakers who made the policies. And so, yeah, I do think data could be really helpful.
Yeah, I appreciate that too. And it's not generally where my head goes to the data, because I'm much more in the feel good sort of anecdotal realm of just what matters to me personally. But when our organization was able to measure and to show data, we got different looks. I mean, it's just the way it is. And the same things were happening. We were just telling the story with different numbers. And when we were able to show a social emotional connection in the garden that sometimes traditional classroom teachers struggle to provide for their students, then we got different looks. And of course, some academic correlation too with science standards and actually even early literacy indicators for some of our students versus other students who don't have our programming. And so, yeah, I mean, data talks. And those numbers do tell a story. And I think it is a powerful one. And I think, yeah, Shawnee, to your point, there has to be some national data that shows a sort of before and after. I know, oh goodness, I'm not going to remember the organization now, but they're a local representative of just the data of the sort of early supports versus like, if you play this out, where does this student go? Needing, they're either going to prison or they're needing these sorts of supports. But like, and I know that feels pretty dramatic, but it does tell a powerful story of this student supported emotionally in order to make these academic strides versus these students who are not. I think that is an important story to tell, and one that, like, as we've noted, I mean, even adults working with children have not had the supports, emotional supports they need to be supporting the babies in schools. And so really, again, that's another, I just step back, put pause, push the pause button kind of thing. I really feel like what if, I mean, there's an organization in town that has taken an entire year off to just work on their internal justice, equity, diversity, inclusion policies, right? Like, what if we just took a year off to just work on social emotional support? You know, I don't know how we'd ever get buy-in at that level, but I mean, it's really just a powerful, like we just keep chugging along as though everything is okay. And what would it look like if we just decided we're just gonna do this because this is what's important?
I do think it's a good reminder for me as a parent. I did this a lot during the pandemic where I'd be like, we're going to go to wherever, because we can be wherever, virtual school. And so, so I think it's a reminder to, for me, not get caught up in my own little kind of hamster wheel, and to remember that I can, they can come late to school sometimes. I'm not, not to promote like, truancy, but, but just to give ourselves that ability to step off the hamster wheel from time to time, and not just kind of like parallel process everything.
But emotional health is health. And as a culture, we leave that out a lot. And so it's like, you'll take a sick day, but what if you just took an emotional health day? Like, that is important. Yeah.
That's something my students have started, because I'm big on taking a mental health day. I suggest people take them at least once a month. My students have started taking mental health days, and they call it that. And one of them emailed me and said, I just need to, I'm feeling my anxiety rise. I'm taking a mental health day. And the fact that they are able to say that and advocate for themselves and recognize it. First, they recognize that they need the time. I think that is huge.
So we are running short on time, and also want to give folks some time between now and their next meeting. So I have two closing questions for you all. And I know there's one question that didn't get answered, so we might stay on with you, answer that if you like. But actually, I might have you do, Elena, just so you know, I'm going to ask you, I know you do a quick breathing exercise with your students in the cafeteria sometimes. So actually, to close us out, I'm going to ask you to maybe take us through that. So before we do that, Susanna, for parents who want to help their kids connect with nature, what's your top tip for how they can do that?
There's so much trial and error in gardening. And so I would just say, just try it. Like, it is a real gift to try alongside your little person and to experience it with them. I feel very grateful that our organization is designed to be a learning organization internally and externally. And so our sort of internal mantra is fail fabulously. Like, we're going to try it and it might not work. And so I feel like that's very empowering to almost narrate your vulnerability to your child. Just be like, I don't know how this is going to work, but let's just go on this nature walk and see if we can find these items. Like, I mean, really, just try it and be vulnerable alongside them if it's not a comfortable place for you to be. And if it is, then just that constant invitation, like Elena did, of just like, all right, 1 out of 10 times you might decide to go outside with me. So I just feel like that as an option for young people is a really powerful one. I agree with you, Milena, that our young people have a better vocabulary and emotional awareness than I did at my kids' ages of 10 and 14. And so that is great empowerment. I also feel like they need some of our experience and wisdom for context, because I hear a lot of words floating around and I'm like, oh, honey, that's not oppression. We need to have a conversation. But to encourage them along those lines, but then giving them examples of like, well, I try this as a stress reliever. Might work for you, might not. Pick it up if you want to use it as a tool, or leave it if it's not going to serve you,
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think the idea of kind of being in wonder and awe with them, and that lets them kind of see, that lets us be our childhood selves, lets them see them. And so Rachel, thanks for your question. I think it's one that I know we've got a lot of parents of teenagers here, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it really quickly. Melina, any advice for a parent whose teenage boy bottles emotions in school stress and won't open up?
Yes, as not only a high school counselor, I have 2 teenagers. Actually, my 17-year-old son opens up more than my 14-year-old daughter does. So that's an interesting dynamic. But one is, as I said, is encouraging them to get out more. Often sitting still, right next to each other can be awkward for them. So getting them outdoors or doing an activity, playing cards, just doing something while you're talking, you might be surprised. Even in the car, if they're sitting behind you, sometimes they feel more comfortable just not looking you in the eye, which Socially is like, why not? Don't ask why not. Just let them start talking first before we get to the why do you behave this way. But so I would encourage you to find an activity that you can do together that is light conversation. And over time, hopefully the conversation will open up more and you all will begin to trust each other more in trust by trusting your feelings. Teenagers are very protective of their feelings, as are adults. They're teenagers are just younger adults, really. So I think we often look at them as children, but they are younger adults. And if we look at them as younger adults and treat them as such, I think the conversations will, the way that they behave might make more sense. So one, I suggest finding an activity that you all can do together, not an activity that you enjoy, but an activity that they enjoy. Often we want to put our fun things on them and they don't like them. So if they don't want to go walk, then that's fine. We'll find something they want to do. You might find yourself playing video games that you didn't want to play, but something that they enjoy so that you can start the conversation. I'm big on just asking the hard questions. And so asking, I noticed that you're more comfortable talking to your counselor than you are to me. What is it that I might be doing that is making you not feel comfortable talking to me? And really listen, because what we do again as parents, and I'm guilty of it myself, is as soon as they start saying something, we want to defend and we want to say, well, give them rationale for it. That's not what they're asking for. You're asking for a reason. So listen for what the reason is that they're giving. If they still aren't comfortable talking, then suggest writing. Like, would you be more comfortable if we wrote to each other? Often teenagers are much more, even young kids are much more comfortable writing their feelings and talking about them. So maybe y'all have like a little journal or notebook that you share and just pass back and forth like we did old school passing notes. They might be more comfortable writing how they're feeling than talking to you directly about them. Anything that will encourage them to share over time, spending time one-on-one. If you have other children, carving out time to do something with each child alone. And you might be doing playing basketball with one kid and playing video games with another and walking the dog with another, but finding time that you can spend one-on-one with each child so that they don't feel overshadowed by whatever the other child is saying or doing. I think all of those things combined over time hopefully will get your child talking to you more, but be patient with them also. Don't get frustrated, because I hear students often say, my mom asked me why I don't talk to her. I try to talk to her, and then she gets mad or she starts telling me these things, and this is why. And she wonders why I don't talk to her. I hear that all the time. She wonders why I don't talk to her. Well, the reasons are there often, not always, not always. Sometimes they're just shy, quiet kids who don't feel comfortable talking. So we have to encourage and nurture that side of them if it doesn't just come naturally for them.
Like you said, you ask them for the walk 10 times, for the one time they might say yes. So I do think that's the other thing. It's just that might take a lot of time for that one opportunity. Before we do the closeout, Jasmine or Caitlin, do we have any other closeout things, or can we do the breathing exercise?
I think we're good to go ahead and move to the breathing exercise.
Okay,
Yeah,
and this
let's
might be something that you can do with your own, whether you're a teacher or an administrator or a parent. Lena, am I right? I may be making this up. I feel like you had like a quick breathing exercise that you do with your students.
Yes, and I'm going to combine. We're going to go into Susanna's garden for a second. So as Susanna was talking about her garden, visualize yourself walking through the garden. And I don't know the name of them, but we used to call them like the little wishing flowers, the white ones that have all the little fuzzy stuff on them.
Dandelions.
Are they real dandelions? Okay, dandelions. That sounds so basic. Okay, so imagine you are walking through a field of dandelions. Make yourself comfortable however you can. If you want to close your eyes, put your feet on the ground, just relax your shoulders. I'm looking at Shani's shoulders are tensed up right now. Relax your shoulders as much as you can. Feel free to, move your neck around a little and just slowly walk through a field of dandelions. And when you see the biggest, fuzziest dandelion in the field, visualize yourself picking up the dandelion. And I'm going to ask you to hold the dandelion in front of you and take a deep breath. Inhale. I'm going to count as you inhale to the count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As you're inhaling, hold the dandelion in front of you and visualize yourself as you exhale, slowly blowing out the dandelion. Hopefully you don't hurt yourself breathing now. And slowly exhale as you blow out all of the little fuzzies on the dandelion. Slowly, we're going to pick up another dandelion and we're going to do it again. Inhale, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And slowly exhale as you blow out all the fuzzies on the dandelion. We're going to pick up one final dandelion. This is going to be the biggest one yet. You thought you had the biggest one. This is the biggest one yet. Inhale as you get ready to blow out this big fuzzy dandelion. Hold it so that you can blow the longest exhale and have all the fuzzies all over the garden with you, and exhale.
Thank you. Was that it? Sorry.
Yes, that's it. The fuzzies are all around, dandelions are all around. Yes, that's them.
I think they're weeds, so we'd have to, it is good that we're picking them, right?
Weeds are
weeds?
just things that are growing where you don't want them to grow. Dandelions are very nutritious.
Oh, awesome. You can eat them too.
They're edible.
Awesome. Well, that was great. Well, thank you both. This is our last Real Talk of 2021. So we'll pick them up in the new year, but you can meanwhile join our Facebook group. You can learn about Maline's work and Susanna's work. Jasmine put some stuff in the chat. And thank you all for coming, and hope you come to some future chats. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. Thanks, Possip.